From dog tags to ownership, heroes take the lead. Stories of veterans building dreams with passion, drive, and speed. From service to success, we're here to inspire the quest. Dog tags to ownership, we're the best. Take the prize.
From the battlefield to the boardroom, this is Dog Tags to Ownership, the podcast where veterans share their journeys from serving our nation to leading in business. Hear inspiring stories of grit, growth, and the entrepreneurial spirit that drives those who've served to succeed. Tune in and take the first step towards your own mission in entrepreneurship.
Military One Percenters, welcome to Dog Tags to Ownership, where once a week we interview veterans who charted a path towards entrepreneurship. Our goals are to share resources, advice, and success stories about starting a business, discuss strategies for building financial independence and creating your own path, and most importantly, build a community to support each other through the challenges of transitioning from service life to civilian ownership. We're extremely excited to introduce our guest to the show today, Gerry Gadoury, a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, #1 best-selling author, and the founder and CEO of RedBeard Solutions, a cybersecurity and information technology professional services firm. Gerry, welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for joining us today to discuss your journey.
Thanks for having me, Julie and Matt.
I'm assuming RedBeard Solutions comes from the beard. I know our listeners maybe can't hear it, but you do have a red beard, so is that where the name comes from? Before we get into it?
If it's only audio, I'll let that slide, but if there were truth in advertising, it'd probably be graybeard these days.
Can you start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself and your military service?
Sure. So I was a SIGINT during the Marines. I did SIGINT for 5 years, had an amazing time, made it to sergeant. 4 knee surgeries later, the Marines don't need sergeants that can't run, so I became a civilian again. And from there, I moved into technical recruiting, into technical sales, ultimately into branch management and regional management. I ran the Kelly IT New England sector, which at the time was a $6.4 billion piece of business. From there, I grew into providing leadership and senior management counseling. So I did sales training, recruiter training, management training for folks in technology services. And that led me to a startup, an exited founder. So our first startup, we grew to, in just under 5 years, we grew to 2,500 employees with 9 offices in 3 countries and an acquisition by NTT Data for right at $250 million. After that craziness, I wrote the book Destination Employer and started RedBeard Solutions. And here we are talking.
Wow, that is an amazing journey. From being in the Marine Corps, 5 years in the Marine Corps, got out to then start your own path, and where you are today. That's amazing. So, and I know in the beginning there, you mentioned you got out of the Marine Corps because of injuries to your knee. When did you get out of the Marine Corps? What year was it?
96. So yeah, I blew my knee in Scotland. I had to wait. So we're a tiny, tiny little debt there, as you might imagine. And so we used local medicine, took them a full 12 months for my first knee surgery. At that point, my knee was pretty much garbage. So I moved back to Lejeune. We did a couple more shots. And again, the Marines don't need sergeants that can't run anymore. So that was the end of that song.
Yeah. So as you've gone through your journey now from your dog tags to ownership, and you got out in 96, has there been any service, like military services or anything that you've utilized to help you start up your startup in RedBeard Solutions?
So no, though I am still very active in the veteran community. I didn't use any of the VA or VA-sponsored SBA tools. In retrospect, I didn't know about them and wish that I did, because there's so much there for us if we know about them. And that's part of the reason why I'm still active in veteran circles, so people don't make the nearly infinite mistakes I've made.
Yeah, I was gonna ask similarly, Gerry. Were there any resources or information available mid-knees when you were transitioning out, or what did that look like at that time? If you can remember, were they helpful in that transition process, or did you kind of feel like you were out on your own again?
So I need you guys to hear that Matt just implied that I can't remember the 90s, which I find more than a little offensive. So yeah, so towards entrepreneurship, absolutely no. The out processing wasn't geared in any way whatsoever for that. The outsourcing was geared towards basic job hunting. I mean, again, I can only speak for the Marines. I can only speak for Lejeune. I can only speak from my own experience. But it was pretty underwhelming. You know, the way that they taught us to build a resume wasn't super helpful. And it just wasn't a lot there. It was mostly about you filling out all your paperwork so you could separate.
Yeah. And I noticed, kind of looking over, I think, your website and LinkedIn page, and as you spoke during the introduction, you talk about your, cyber background, but there's also this leadership and training and coaching trait that you have. So is that something that came from the Marine Corps, or is that something that was instilled in you at another point? Or how did those two things sort of gel together?
So all of the above is really the answer. I'm a lifelong martial artist, and leadership is something that was inculcated into us in our dojo from the time I was about 13 years old. The Marine Corps, of course, is renowned for the leadership proponents. JJ did tie buckles. I still remember even before the 90s, Matt. And so, yes, I do want to say, and maybe this is a question for later, maybe now you tell me, but I do want to say learning to transition military, specifically Marine Corps leadership, to a civilian audience is something that needs to be understood. I was so bad at it that my first leadership role, my manager would send people she didn't want to stay with the company to my team because she knew I would drive them out by being far too gung-ho and far too little understanding of what a civilian is looking.
Yeah. So that took some time for you to, I guess, mature into and evolve into the leadership to be able to lead civilians like you led Marines, I guess.
Well, I think the fundamentals of military leadership is you play the hand you're dealt. So you get your folks and you learn how to make that work. That's not the reality in the civilian world. You choose your team largely, and they decide whether or not they stay with you. In the military, pretty much, unless somebody really spikes the ball, they're with you. You know, they're who you have. But again, not the case in the civilian world, which was really the biggest crux in my error, because I didn't learn right away to lead with what's in it for them. I led with mission accomplishment. In the Marine Corps, we teach mission accomplishment, troop welfare. In the civilian world, there's an inverse there.
So how did you, I guess, come across or have the self-awareness that your leadership style was not working in the civilian sector? And then what did you do to better help yourself in leadership for the civilian sector, and then also getting into entrepreneurship?
Two-part answer. This isn't a Google-generated backdrop. I read endlessly. I probably read between 2 and 3 books a month, and have since I was a teenager. I am a lifelong learner, and I love to learn. And when it became clear to me that my deficit was the way I was applying leadership principles, I started reading a lot. One book I would strongly recommend to anyone. By the way, this is a gift I give to every person in my family when they graduate high school, but I would certainly recommend to any entrepreneur, is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey. Not a page turner. Dude's dry, but it is foundational leadership. And that was really transformative for me. But as far as the cue, I think the 3rd or 4th person that quit in a row was a good indicator that I wasn't doing this right.
Good. So can we talk more about RedBeard Solutions and what you offer through that company? You are the founder and owner operator of that. So can you talk a little bit more for our audience members?
Absolutely. So it was an outgrowth of my professional and military experience up to that point. Most decidedly focused on my experience at Apisero. So Apisero is a MuleSoft implementation company. So we built APIs, we installed MuleSoft, we built MuleSoft connectors, that sort of thing. And what we learned there was amazing. I was originally brought onto that team to build the national go-to-market strategy, hire the team, and then run that team to sell nationally. And within 6 months, it became abundantly clear that selling MuleSoft at that time was not hard, but finding the people to do it was. So we switched gears to recruiting, which again is part of my background anyway. And we built a recruiting engine that got us from 0 to 2,500 people in less than 5 years. And so Destination Employer, the book, The program and RedBeard Solutions, the company that implements it, is focused on that. How can I help technology services companies? Predominantly, I do a lot of work with the government and the intel space, but how do we help those companies to build an employer brand so top talent comes to them? How do we help them to build hiring processes that lands the talent that they're attracting, pushes back the talent that won't succeed with them, and how we teach them to retain that talent so that they can run at a high level for forever. So that's really the gist of how all that came about.
So when you started the company, did you start it because of the book, or did you start it all together at once? And then were you the only person and then you scaled it after that? How did you go about, I guess, like forming your business and then bringing the business to where it is today?
So I'd already had an entity called Applied Knowledge Enterprises that I ran my executive coaching through, that I ran my sales and recruiter training through. That entity morphed into an entity to hold my intellectual property. So my book is owned by that company. My program is owned by that company. When Apisero was done, I was at a crossroads. We'd sold to NTT Data. I thankfully escaped the trawling net of getting sucked into NTT Data like the CEO did and the COO did. As the president, I managed to slip out of that. So I needed a gig. And I did some soul searching. That's when I started writing the book. And I thought to myself, how many people can say they've been a part of that size of company growing that fast? There's so many lessons to learn. And because I came from talent acquisition, I could speak experientially to the fact that very few did. And the reasons were plain. So I wrote the book in service to running the company. It became an intro. I do a lot of speaking at conferences and have for a very long time. So it was a way to get replugged into the startup community again. And that's really led to the business. But it was all part of a master plan to re-enter and again, to help small, predominantly technology services companies to achieve what we did.
So Gerry, what did a day look like in your shoes when you were getting the company going, building it, scaling it? What does it look like today?
Yeah. So Apisero, the days were crazy there. That was especially when things really started to take off. Let me actually take a step back and answer a side question before I answer this, and I apologize. So one of the biggest things I learned, and this is a Dr. Covey thing, is to start with the end in mind. When we started Apisero, we built it to sell. We knew that we were going to be living, never mind burning the candle at both ends, we threw the candle in the fire, and we knew that was going to be the case. So that was 5 years of darn near consistent 7 days a week. 6 of our 9 offices were in India, so we were working around the clock. If you're familiar with it, it's called follow the sun management. But I'd have 2 a.m. calls with our architects in India, followed by an 8 a.m. call with a client in New England. So that just was the nature of the beast. Needless to say, when RedBeard came around, I did not want to do that again. So my end game isn't to sell RedBeard in 5 years. It's to build a sustainable business that I can run, ad infinitum. My dad's 76 and still works full time. If I retire before him, he will probably have me killed. So I didn't want a company that required that. Having said that, I think a big life lesson for me was that you don't need to work 24/7, but there's no consistency in the schedule of an entrepreneur's life. There's times that are hustle where we're working 7 days a week, and there's times when you can pull back, and you've just got to go with that flow. So in the beginning, it was just me. Our team's up to, I think, 7 people now, and we'll continue to grow, but we'll never be 2,500 people. I'm not a big company guy. The last year of Apisero, I was actively miserable. I do not like being part of organizations that large.
No, that's good to hear. And I think, sometimes as we interview folks, we don't necessarily get into the things that they did not, right? It's all like sunshine and rainbows, and this was like the greatest thing. It's always good, I think, for our listeners to hear, one, that you were putting in insane hours, because a lot of people look at a military member and be like, well, at a time they deploy a lot, or they have busy schedules. They don't have a lot of time to themselves. You had 0 time to yourself, and you were still able to obviously build and create this incredibly successful company. So I think it's just important, though, for our listeners to also hear the downsides and the challenges as well, the aspects that you really did not like.
Yeah, I still put in weekend hours almost every weekend, but I will say this. So when I started my first company, Influence Understood, I was recently divorced. And 4 kids, 2 younger kids. The relationship my wife and I had was I provided, she supported. So she was 100% mom at home. She did all the school stuff, all those things. When we divorced, I realized that that was a strategic error, as my relationship with my 2 older kids was mostly through my wife. So I made the commitment when I started my business that I would miss nothing with the 2 younger kids. And I have not missed a single event, school counseling, a show, anything, zero. So even though I say, and it's real, that I often work 7 days a week, I make it to that stuff. That was the core promise I made as part of starting my own place.
Yeah, and so with that too, you somewhat mentioned at the beginning that you go to leadership conferences and you speak, and then you also have your own podcast. So are all of those things part of the bigger RedBeard Solutions company, or is that something you do also on the side and like another type business?
I'm not the best at saying no, so that's part of it. But in all seriousness, and what I'm about to say is true of my space and not necessarily a universal truth. But in my space, in my niche, traditional sales and marketing outreach isn't effective. Cold calling isn't effective. Cold outreach isn't effective. Being a subject matter expert is. So when I speak at a conference and I step off a stage, owners come to talk to me. When I host podcasts, people can hear my thoughts and have a consistent way to get to know me before we engage. So for me, it's a part of my overall marketing strategy.
And how long have you been doing your podcast?
So I've done 2. Influence Understood. I had one that was incredibly imaginatively named Influence Understood. And that was in the old audio days, in the Stone Ages. The new one, and I did that for a year. The new one, I think we're on the 87th episode, somewhere in the high 80s. So about a year and a half, we do a weekly show. And it's been great. I love podcasting.
Yeah, so I asked the question because Matt and I started this podcast back on January 7th. The 34th episode will drop tomorrow. So any tips or tricks, insight that you have for those that want to get into podcasting or new podcast folks that want to get into that and help their businesses grow? Anything that you've learned along the way with your podcast?
For sure. Number one is know your why. What's the reason? A lot of folks start podcasts for their business, but their podcast isn't targeted appropriately to attract their ICP. So it doesn't give them the support that they think it would. So that's the first thing. The second thing is really think through your delivery schedule and make sure you don't overcommit. I find weekly is the best, but if you don't have the time for weekly consistently, do bi-weekly or do monthly. You've got to be consistent. Skipping a show is bad. It's a big deal. Your audience reacts negatively to that. And then the final piece, in the beginning, if you can, do as much of the things yourself as you can, because then when it comes time to offload, you can more intelligently interview the company or the person that you're offloading to.
Yeah, that's all great advice. That's all things that we've been doing and also have heard in the past. So, and I think for you, right, like it's a good thing for podcasting in general is that it can be very niche specific. And so for you, like it's
We
with
need
your
to.
niche and what you do. And like for us, our niche is the military and veteran community and those who want to get into entrepreneurship to tell those stories. So it's like you said, finding the why and what you're doing and what you're trying to get out to your audience.
Huge. And I'll tell you, for people who are on the fence, the tools are so much easier now. I don't shill products, but if I was going to, Riverside is one I would shill for. We're recording on that now. It's the same tool I use for my podcast, and it is train monkey easy. They make consistent, meaningful upgrades. Their support is top shelf. The few times I've needed it, they've been hyper responsive. It's a great tool. In the old days, I used to have to record on GarageBand, do my editing there, upload it to a site that held it. Then it was a nightmare.
Pretty Jerry, that when I had that episode that really messed up, we had the meet and greet, and you told me if I reached out to Riverside that they could help me retrieve it all. And
Yep.
so I was able to. I mean, I was able to salvage that episode decently. It wasn't our best, but it was you that I think pointed me in that right direction.
It's a good outcome. I'll take credit.
No, I was just trying to weave in a 90s joke as he was talking about podcasting back in the Stone Age, but I mean, even that was post 90s. So
Well, Matt, apparently I wouldn't remember anyway, so say anything.
everything post 2000 we'll go with that you can probably recall. So where are things at now? What's ahead of you? Like, what does the next 2 to 3 years, what does the next 5 years look like from a planning perspective? Where do you want to take this business?
Yeah, so I'm not looking to retire. What I am looking to do as we grow and become more profitable is to overbuild my management infrastructure so I'm not necessary full time. So I don't want to, in very related news, this is the same advice I used to give when I was coaching leaders that want to run what ultimately becomes a lifestyle business, is you overbuild your internal infrastructure such that you essentially become an internal consultant. You can focus on the biggest opportunity, the biggest problem, and let the other folks handle all the day-to-day. We're certainly not there yet, but I believe we can be in 2 to 3 years.
And then I question as well, I think maybe in line with that, what does success look like for you now? Maybe what did it look like in the 90s? But what does it look like now for you? Like, how do you gauge and define success?
Yeah, for me, I'm still in the upward front edge of our growth curve. So for me, if you were to use a human analogy, we're still a toddler to a young child. Success for me is knowing I can take a week off and that the majority of things that go on can be handled without me. Success for me means I can cut my hours back to 20 or 30 hours a week so I can do other things that I'm passionate about. And again, we are certainly not there today, but in 2 to 3 years, I sincerely believe we will be.
Yeah. And I don't know, a lot of the folks we talk with, and I know Julie and I have had these conversations, but it seems like, and maybe it's just priorities in life as we get a little bit more gray in our beard or in our hair in Julie's case, but time seems to be the thing that we put the highest value on. And maybe it's a position of privilege because you are in maybe a better place financially than you were when you were 20 or 30 years old. But that seems to be a recurring theme with a lot of our guests is the priorities and time and spending time, which is so valuable on the things that you want to do and the people you want to be with more so than you did maybe 20 years ago. Thoughts on that?
100% yes. So at risk of offering a unified theory for physics and making Einstein right, it does seem in the theory of relativity that the older you get, the faster time goes. I remember as a teenager in high school, summers lasted forever. Now, I kid you not, I sometimes will wake up and go, season's over already? It's insane. It's time just seems to move so quickly. And for those of us that have families and have children, I'm here to tell you folks, you get 18 summers with them and they're gone. And you would be shocked how fast that 18 goes by. So my oldest is 31 and my youngest is 16. So I still remember the oldest one being born in Scotland. It really is a big deal. People talk about it a lot, but they still don't talk about it enough.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, Matt and I talk about that a lot. As Matt just he's on terminal leave right now as he's retiring. And then I transition out next year, and just like how fast 20 years in the military goes. I think at the beginning it's not gonna go that fast, and then all of a sudden you like blink and you're like, oh my gosh, time to retire. But one thing I do want to go back to, you had mentioned at the beginning, like you're very still connected with the veteran community and helping veterans know what resources and things are out there, and that you wish you would have known about some of the SBA loans and things like that. Could you just elaborate, I guess, a little bit on some of the resources that you have found that you help other veterans with as they're getting into entrepreneurship, if you have any off the top of your head?
Absolutely, yes. So I can only speak again in the segment of the universe that I work in. So I do a lot with technology and intelligence government contracting companies. So there's tons of organizations that support that. And it will surprise you not at all to hear that that's a space occupied largely by veterans. It almost seems like a requirement to be a technology government contract business owner. You need to be a retired Air Force lieutenant colonel. It almost seems like a requirement. But yeah, so there's organizations like AFCEA, NDIA, that are often free to individual contributors, service members, and people like that, who they can start getting involved with those and learning more. And in every single one of them, there's a small bit business component, because the government at least pays lip service to the importance of small business doing business with the government. I could argue they could do an infinitely better job than they do, but they at least played lip service. So by extension, these organizations all have small business groups within them that can start feeding you that information. The VA does a pretty good job as well, though the SBA now handles all of the certifications for your veteran-owned businesses. So getting plugged into the SBA and VA is huge. Additionally, LinkedIn is the largest business networking site in the world, and there are a significant number of folks and organizations and groups there. Following government contracting recruiters can be a great way. There's any of mine, for example, but also other organizations like Ricky Daring is a former Army Ranger that works in the same space I do. He has tons of great content of places where you can plug in on your way out the door. But the biggest advice I would give is start thinking about your exit before you do. Mine was medical, so it wasn't quite the same. And my first sergeant had me in the field till the day I left. Thanks, buddy. But you want to start thinking about that 6 months or further out, and taking advantage of programs, that can support that.
Yeah, we hope things have moved, and we think things have moved in a better direction as far as that transition assistance piece by all the services, and that you're not in the field hopefully anymore on your way into transitioning into civilian life. So I think speaking from experience, I think it's moving in the right direction. It's not perfect. It never will be, especially when you're trying to transition out thousands, tens of thousands of folks. So I know it's a big machine, and they do a decent job now with the transition piece, but it's not perfect. It can always use other people out there sharing information and sharing ideas, certainly in podcast forums like this.
I will say, again, I was only ever in the Marines, so I can't speak for other services, but your time in the military is the experience you make of it. I got all of my college credits. I went from high school to Marines while I was in the Marines. Any chance I got, I took those classes. Your exit is the same as that. If you hang around with excuse my Latin, but if you hang around with the shitbirds, you're gonna have a bad day. So if you take your exit seriously and search for the resources, because nobody's gonna knock on your door, maybe in the Air Force, I don't know, but nobody's gonna knock on your door with a list of things to do and places to go, then you're gonna have a better experience than if you don't.
Yeah, I think the Air Force, they write the resumes for them before they
I assume they go on interviews as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I was only on Air Force Base once. It was for my second knee surgery. Yeah, second knee surgery. First one was in Scotland. And what a wild experience that was. I was done eating and people I'm not joking, they took my tray. And I was like, what is this strange place?
Real silverware too, right?
Yeah, yes. I will save you the chow hall stories we had in Scotland. Yes, there were in the Jello. That's a Scottish thing.
Wow.
It was an experience.
So, Gerry, what would be a piece of advice you would give to a veteran or military member who is wanting to pursue entrepreneurship and open up their own business? What would be a piece of advice or lesson learned that you have to help them in going through that pursuit?
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but begin with the end in mind. Why do you want to be an entrepreneur? My dad teases me endlessly about being the only person he knows that works 80 hours a week, so I don't have to work 40 for somebody else. So being an entrepreneur is awesome. I've been doing this for a decade now. I wouldn't change anything, but it's not an easy road. So examine your why. It's nothing like TV makes it out to be. And once you understand your why, start doing the research as to what that means. And if you wind up in a service industry, don't ever commit to anything outside your control. That's one of the first things I learned, and it's one piece of advice I always give. Don't make promises for things that you can't control the outcome of.
Great advice.
I was gonna ask, what have we not asked you that you expected us to ask you today on the podcast?
expect shots on my age, you ageist. But other than that, no, you really covered it. I love my time in the Marines. I know I sound like most when I say, had my knee not gotten destroyed, I'd every plan. We're already talking about re-enlisting. I had an amazing experience there. And the things that you learn in the military truly can impact the trajectory of your life afterwards. But just like when you're in the military, you've got to take ownership. Your outcome is yours. And if you sit and ride and let other people make your decisions for you, you get what you get.
That's great advice.
I guess if there was no other questions or anything else you wanted to bring up on the podcast, I'll turn it over to Matt for our final two questions.
So similarly, I enjoy reading leather-bound books like you, Gerry, or listening to podcasts, audiobooks, that sort of thing, mostly on real estate. That's my passion. What would you recommend to our listeners? I know you already recommended one, so you can't do the 7 habits of highly effective people. So you got to pick another one.
So I did write a book called Destination Employer. If you're building an org, I do recommend it. Not to be the most self-serving dude on the planet, but it's built from real-world experience and how we got to a $250 million exit.
Tell us a little bit more about the book. Let's talk a little bit more about it.
For sure. So the whole reason why Apisero succeeded the way it did is because we developed a reputation in the marketplace where our particular ideal candidate, which was MuleSoft folks, where those people could 10x their careers. Because of that, we were able to attract talent that our competitors couldn't, and we're able to keep them where they couldn't either. So the purpose of Destination Employer is to teach, again, predominantly service industry companies, because the way companies are valued is different in that space, but this is true of any organization. It's to teach them how to consistently attract top talent, actually get them to come aboard, and most importantly, to perform at a high level for longer than what industry standards are now. If you can't run a team that's performing at a high level, you can't succeed.
Can I get it on audio?
You can. Yep. It's in Kindle, in paperback, in hardcover. No leather covers yet, but maybe soon. They're Rod Burgundy, and then in audio as well.
So I'll
Glad you
definitely
picked
link
up
it to
on it.
our show notes as well, and then also to our website for people to have if they want to go and find it and look it up. But I think I might have to download it as well. Sounds like an amazing book.
I think you should.
Yeah.
Matt, I that reference works on me. 60% of the time it works 100%.
Touche. Well done. Well done.
So I'll get to our last question, Gerry. So Admiral William McCraven authored the book "Make Your Bed: Little Things That Can Change Your Life and Maybe the World." So Gerry, do you make your bed every day?
I do, but I'm going to add a twist. He was right, and in the military, you have to do it right away because you're out the door. But we know now through science and hygiene that while you should make your bed every day, you should leave it fallow for a half an hour to 40 minutes so it can completely dry before you do it, before you make it. So I go work out and grab a shower, and then I make my bed. So take that, Admiral.
All right. Yeah. No, that's actually the first time I've heard that, but that's actually makes sense. So yeah,
And that's
maybe.
why you ask an enlisted person and
Yeah,
not an officer.
that's true.
Is that a European thing? Where did you, I mean, other than science, I guess, saying it, isn't that where it's predominantly more common, maybe?
So I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but it was a couple of years ago, and somebody was debunking should you make your bed every day. It was specific to that talk the Admiral gave was amazing, by the way, but it was specific to that. And they said, well, actually, as human beings, we emit a lot of humidity when we sleep. We sweat in our sleep and whatnot, and closing that up immediately increases the bacteria count on your sheets and pillow. But by leaving it open for an hour or so and then making your bed, you're good to go. I will admit, and probably not the best way to end the call, I have not succeeded in getting my children to do that.
Yeah, asked as a follow-on, but you and Mike dropped it with your science, so I didn't have to today.
Gerry, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your journey, and for the parts that you could remember, because I know as we get older, that can be a challenge. But no, truly, you provided some incredible information to our listeners. And I'm glad we were able to talk about a bit more about the transition from your service into the civilian life and with what has made you incredibly successful. not once, but or twice, but you continue to be a success, and it seems like everything you do. Um, a great mindset, I think that you have, and I'm glad that our listeners will be able to listen to this and have some really good takeaways from you. So thanks.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Military One Percenters, whether you're brainstorming your first business idea, already running a company, or just curious about where to start, Dog Tags to Ownership is the place for you. Please hit that subscribe button to receive all new episodes. Also, if you know someone who has turned their dog tags into ownership, drop us a DM on social media or tag someone. We are always looking for new guests to bring onto the podcast. And as always, Military One Percenters, thank you for your service. Let's continue this journey and working together to write our next chapter. Until next week, keep pushing to turn those dog tags into ownership.
From dog tags to ownership, heroes take the lead. Stories of veterans building dreams with passion, drive, and speed. From service to success, we're here to inspire the quest. Dog tags to ownership, we're the best. Take the pride